Our involvement has ranged from initial proof of concepts to taking a brand direct to their consumer across multiple regions. So when Simon said he wanted to discuss D2C, my immediate thought was that maybe it'd be interesting to some people to share common obstacles that we've seen when transitioning to a D2C model. I've roughly categorized these common obstacles into 4 areas. The first of which is operational issues. The first question you got to ask yourself and the wider organization is, can you fulfill the orders? It sounds stupid, but is your warehouse set up for dispatching single items or a range of items across multiple categories? As it's fairly common for B2B warehousing to be kitted out just for dispatching packs or pallets. If self-dispatch isn't an option, are you able to utilize a third-party logistics provider? Again, might sound like a stupid question, but there are legal and tax implications. For instance, if your logistics provider decides to house your stock offshore. Also, we found that some departments within a company are resistant to stock being held by a third party, especially if it moves outside their jurisdiction. So, okay, you can ship your stock, but what about returns? Whilst seller return is pretty common in B2B, it's also pretty common that stock goes out that warehouse door and it never returns to you. So that's not so much the case with D2C. Before you go upsetting your brand advocates, you need to consider how you're going to deal with these returns that you're inevitably going to get, and how are you going to QA those returns to make sure that everything that comes back from your users doesn't just end up going in the bin, like a lot of stuff at Amazon obviously does at the moment. Perhaps a slightly less obvious operational issue that we've come across is that sometimes B2B organizations don't have the required stock to fulfill D2C orders year round. This is often a result of organizations trying to drive up efficiency by direct dispatch from manufacturer to retailer, or for example, in traditional fashion retailing, there may be 2 to 4 seasons a year with corresponding stock drops. That then means in between those drops, stock dwindles to a point where you can't fulfill a basic level of ordering. When you're going direct to your consumer, maintaining expected levels of availability for a product over its life cycle is pretty important, as the consumer is going to be questioning, if I can't get it from the brand, where else should I be getting it from? So you may end up losing orders and losing your retailers' orders if you're not able to showcase that a product is still in stock. We're at a Magento meetup. I run a Magento development team, so it'd be pretty unusual if we didn't talk about the obstacles, well, technological obstacles going D2C. And to be fair, there can be a lot of them. So I'm not going to be able to cover all of those obstacles. But the first obvious obstacle is, what e-commerce platform are you going to choose? So let's assume that you made a sensible decision. Anyone who mentions
Am I frozen or is Simon frozen?
Simon's frozen.
Nothing.
Yeah.
I think you have to turn the CD over.
a lot of obstacles remaining. And they tend to run in parallel to the logistical issues that I walked through previously. For example, how are you going to get those orders from your shiny new website to your ERP, WMS, or third-party logistics provider? This is where I'd be heading down to the IT department asking a series of questions, starting with, do we have an API for receiving orders? No? Okay. Do we have any customers that currently order via an EDI, and could we utilize that to take orders from the website? Still no? Okay. Well, how about if site sends you a CSV or a text file however often you need to? Will we be able to automatically import those into the ERP? Hopefully the answer is yes to that one. Sometimes though, there's going to be scenarios where the answer to all of those is no, and we've come across that. And that's when it's time to rephrase those questions with, instead of do we have, into how much will it cost us to do this? And the answer may be surprising. It might cost a lot. It might actually not cost very much, depending on the actual ERP or WMS that you're currently sat on. As before, the next issue you're going to get is returns. Creating orders should be pretty fully automated at the business end. Your customer places an order, it automatically gets sent to your warehouse for picking, and hopefully it gets dispatched. However, when it comes to returns, this often isn't the case, as you need to collect further information from your customer, potentially organize collections from them, QA the incoming goods to make sure they're still in a good condition so you can retail them again, and issue refunds or replacements for those orders. All of this can be hellishly time consuming. And it's often what puts a lot of B2B companies off of going D2C. So from the outset, I'd be considering how we're going to scale this particular issue and maintain profitability. Most decent e-commerce platforms these days come with some form of returns management authorization. I know Magento does. That sort of platform should allow as much of this process to be automated as possible. There still is a lot of manual work there, but we should be able to automate some of it and reduce the overhead or the cost of managing returns. If the platform you've chosen doesn't have a built-in RMA, there are other solutions that you can use. So a ticketing system that would allow your customers to raise a ticket to say they want to return something, or potentially might be a process already built into your ERP that would cover your immediate needs. So it's worth asking around the organization on how returns are currently managed. In addition to returns, customer queries tend to come in thick and fast in D2C, as not only are you a retailer where customers are going to ask you questions about delivery and returns, but you're also the brand owner or the manufacturer. So customers are going to come to you as well to ask questions specific to the product, and they expect you to be the expert about your product. So again, from the outset, I'd be considering baking into your platform a ticketing system, a hub for FAQs, both generic ones, product specific ones. If you don't know what I mean by that, I would always use the Screwfix product page as a great example of a product FAQ section, along with the Amazon product pages where there's hundreds of questions for most products. That's going to reduce the number of calls they're coming into because your customers are asking questions on there. Potentially your customers are able to answer other customers' questions as well. Also, if possible, I'll be looking at live chat to head off those questions to keep those call rates down, because one live chat agent can deal with multiple queries at once, whereas one person on the phone can only talk to one person at once. So it is another solution to help keep customer communication more manageable. One more common technological obstacle that may seem pretty unusual to some people is how your customers are going to pay you. Why have I put this in the technological bracket? Well, we've had multiple occasions where companies' finance teams have demanded that a payment gateway is utilized, potentially as they think it's going to be easier as they've already got a contract with that provider, but it literally has no support on major e-commerce platforms, causing quite a headache for the D2C project. In those scenarios, the real questions to be asked internally are, can we move to a hopefully better provider such as Adyen, Stripe, maybe even PayPal? Or can we afford to build a bespoke integration with our existing provider? And by build, I also mean maintain it, because we're dealing with card details here or payment details, and it's integral that we do maintain that from a security point of view, you don't lose customer data. My advice there is, honestly, don't do the latter. Go with a pre-existing payment gateway that works with your e-commerce platform, you're going to save yourself a lot of headaches, and it's probably going to be cheaper. As with any major business change, there's going to come some real resistance and fear going D2C. It's no exception, if I'm honest, going D2C. So to allay those fears and manage that resistance, I'd be asking internally, who do we need to convince the most? Whose job is perceived to be at risk, or whose job is going to be made potentially more difficult by going D2C? Is that the customer service team who know that they're going to get a larger amount of inbound calls, or is that the sales director who's worried that their targets are going to be harder to achieve if their retailers are having part of their market eaten into by your D2C site? So get in early and discuss their fears, see if you can come up with a workable solution for them. It's not always going to be possible, if I'm honest, because the most common argument faced is that you're going to piss off your existing retailers. And quite frankly, there's no way of hiding from the fact that you are going to do that to some of them. Not all of them, but some of them. So the question is, how can your new D2C sites support an existing sales pipeline? At its simplest, this may be including a store locator that promotes your current retail network. Moving up to more complicated scenarios, you may wish to think about building a solution that would allow your pre-existing retail network to share and fulfill potentially your online sales. Those solutions can often increase the online sales because it allows you to have a greater depth of stock by basically utilizing your retailer's stock on your website. And there's a lot of ways about doing that. If you want to discuss that sort of solution and examples of where that is working, I know a couple on Magento where that works, and then feel free to drop me a line and I'll go through any queries that you've got on that. Finally, one of the biggest political obstacles to D2C is who's going to pay for the investment. Websites don't build themselves, developers need paying, and that's who's going to pay internally isn't a question I can't really answer. It's specific to each organization, but I would start considering at the start of your journey and questioning throughout it, who internally, who in the organization is going to benefit from this, and can they contribute? So if you have someone in the organization demanding that, for instance, there is a way of supporting the existing retail network, do they have it in their budget to contribute to that assistance rather than just making demands on the project, and then take it from there? So you've got sign off on your new D2C site, you've cracked the logistics, the FD signed the checks for you, the sales director hasn't killed you for upsetting his major retailers, his or hers, for him. I shouldn't really said his. So job done. Not so much if you're the team that have to deliver the platform. And this is where the hard work really is about to begin for you guys. One of the first and most persistent issues you're going to come across in software development is that your data isn't clean. You're going to hear that time and time again, but don't worry, the data is never going to be clean, and you're just going to have to live with that issue. What I mean by that your data is not clean is a few examples would be your product data may currently be stored in a Word document, or perhaps it's stored on paper and faxed around the organization. We've seen that. Or maybe it's just inside someone's head. That's a fairly common scenario. But when building your new D2C website, none of those examples of data storage are going to be good enough. So you're going to have to come up with a way to get that data from where it is now into your shiny new website, and be it sitting the person down whose information is in their head and making them write it out, or copying and pasting and reformatting information from a Word document or transcribing it from paper. That task has to be done. It's a large task, and it's often time consuming. So I really would start thinking about that. Like product data, you may find yourself lacking in the assets that you thought you once had or you thought you had. Do you have product images? Do you have category images? And if you do, are they really good enough to showcase the products in a way that you want to showcase them? Would you, looking at your product images that you have, would you purchase your products from those? Is the question I would be asking myself. And then if you do have product descriptions and they've already been written out and that data is clean, has someone in marketing actually already given that out to the retail network, and maybe that's why it had been transcribed? Now, if they've done that and those product descriptions are being utilized all over the web by your retailers already, it's potentially made them useless, and you may have to consider rewriting them, because what you don't want is your new D2C website being penalized by the likes of Google for duplicate content, because that data is already being used throughout the retail network. So in all honesty, product data is one of the banes of my life on projects. So when starting your D2C journey, I would really think about immediately starting to think about how are we going to populate this site, and probably for a rough ballpark to start thinking it's going to take us about half a day to write and edit a good product description. So simply do the maths and how much time is that going to take you if you've got 1,000 products, and you've not got any assets to start off with. So you've got your site up running. The next obvious question is, how are you going to reach your customer? Now, this is a massive topic, which obviously I'm not going to go into, but it's really just to kind of start kicking, to let the can be kicked down the road, to get people to start thinking about it. But do you have any pre-existing databases that you can interact with your consumers? It may not be as obvious as a nice big newsletter audience over in .digital, but these sort of databases are often amassed by manufacturers and brands, for example, through getting consumers to register for warranties. Or internally, do you have digital marketing expertise that allow you to achieve the targets that the organization are going to set you? Or have you contracted that out externally? If you've not got either of these in place, it's again something I'd be considering earlier in the project rather than later, and definitely well before launch, because if you launch your new D2C website and it's a flop because no one finds it, no one comes to it, you've just invested a lot of money and potentially political capital internally into something that is not going to get those returns, and the wider organization is going to start questioning, why on earth we even attempted this, because we've just wasted a load of money. I appreciate that was a rather brisk introduction to what's faced by many of our clients when they go D2C, but hopefully it was useful. Thanks for listening. Any questions, do feel free to fire them over to me. That is not my email there, but I can get it over to people if they do have any questions. So thanks very much for listening.